Morning everybody, it's Tuesday morning. Hope you have a fantastic Tuesday. Yesterday we began to consider the mountain that God has said that He would like for it to be removed from our lives, and we've been looking at that amazing verse that talks about the fact that any mountain that stands in the way of the will of God, a grain of little mustard seed can move that mountain. And we've been looking at some of these mountains. I want to suggest to you today that if these mountains could speak, they would say certain things to us. We've been considering, we started yesterday, talking about the mountain of shame. Shame is a terrible emotion. Shame is as low as you can go. Shame is when guilt has gone wrong and guilt has become toxic, because guilt can lead us to do something about it. That's why God has given us sometimes a guilty conscience. But when guilt is not acted upon appropriately and Satan gets a hold of that thing, you're in a lot of trouble, because guilt takes you to the depths of this thing called shame. That, people, is a huge mountain that we need to get rid of. It has no place in our lives. Now, we spoke yesterday about the voice that Satan would love to throw in your face. He would love to say to you, you should be ashamed of yourself. I know what you've done. I know what thoughts you've been thinking. I've seen where you've been, and I know what you're doing. You should be ashamed of yourself. And we often hear that voice, and as believers, we have to recognize the source from which it comes. It comes, guys, ladies, from the pit of hell, and we need to move that mountain of shame. One of the great examples that we find in Scripture that speaks into this would be found in the book of Judges. Chapter 6, we meet a man by the name of Gideon, who's deeply ashamed of himself. He's up there in the mountain, and he's in a wine press of all places, and he's trying to thresh out a little bit of the wheat that he himself has grown. But he can't even go down into the valley to claim what is rightfully his, because the Midianites have occupied the valley. And so here's Gideon, ashamed of himself, and suddenly he hears the voice behind him saying, "Hey Gideon, hail, mighty warrior." And you know the story. Gideon responds and he says, "I'm not a mighty warrior. You've got the wrong guy. I'm anything but." And he goes on to make a whole lot of claims of shame. Imagine claiming shame. And he says, "I'm not a mighty warrior. I am anything but. I'm a victim." And the voice of shame would say to you today, you're a victim. But remember, yesterday we said it's not what the voice says, it's what your Father says that is really important. The voice of shame would want you to think that you're a victim to your circumstances, you're a victim to your upbringing, you're a victim to people, you're just a plain victim. But your Father would want for you to know today that you're a victor. You stand on winning ground. If God is with you and God is behind you and around you and with you, are without a doubt not a victim, you are a victor. Now Pastor Mike did a fantastic devotion in our staff devotions the other day, and he helped us to define in a way what a victim mentality looks like. I have 3 points for you that Mike shared with us. He said, first of all, a victim is an accuser. He's the one who's always blaming somebody for his particular predicament. He accuses people. You see, he's too proud to acknowledge that maybe there's a responsibility on his side, and he will play the blame game by accusing. Now, Gideon did exactly that. We will maybe accuse people and circumstances for us being the victim, but he accused God. He said, if God is for us, as you say, Angel, then why have all these bad things happened to us? And he had the audacity to accuse God for his victim situation. That was the first thing that Mike said. You get people who accuse others, even ultimately God himself. And then you get people who are excusers. These are the people, who want to excuse themselves for their poor behavior. It's not my fault. Didn't Gideon do that? He said to the angels, it's not my fault. Don't you know I come from a long line of rejects. I come from a long line of failures. I'm just like my father and my father's father and my father's father before him. I'm just a victim because of them. And he found somebody to blame. And then we find ultimately that people, we are choosers. We are accusers, or we can be, we can be an excuser, or we are ultimately all of us choosers. We get actually to choose what attitude we would like to have. Now here's an interesting thing. You know that God has given you a free will. He will never violate your freedom of choice. Never force anybody to do that. Sometimes in Scripture He may make circumstances that would push somebody into making a particular choice. But 99.9% of the time, God allows you to make the choices that you would want to make. Now the choice between a victim and a victor, I don't want to oversimplify this, but it's really a choice. If you weigh up the evidence, people, we're not victims. I don't care what circumstances you come from. I don't care how bad your life has been. And I'm not being unsympathetic to some of the things that have happened to you. I would hate to be seen to belittle your pain. But I have to tell you, people, at the end of the day, true believers understand that beautiful verse in Colossians 3 that says, I am more than a conqueror through Christ. That means bring it on. Whatever Satan has to throw at you, whatever the world would have for you, whatever happens, we remember as believers, we are more than conquerors through Christ. We're not just conquerors. Everything in the Bible is to an extreme. It's excessive, it's big, it's extreme. We are more than conquerors through Christ. You're not more than a conqueror on your own. You are more than a conqueror through Christ who loves us. So don't allow the victim's mentality to get you down. You're not a victim, people. You're a victor, and you stand on victory ground. I hope you find that to be true today. It's a choice. Cheers.